Welcome to today's session on how to complete an ACC 45 injury claim form. My name's Maggie Robson. I'm the Provider Education Lead here at ACC, and it's my responsibility to bring these webinars and the supporting education resources for you. So I'm just going to introduce the team that we have for you today, and then I'm going to go through some housekeeping. So let's start with Jono.
Thanks, Maggie. Kia ora koutou. I'm John O'Henry, Clinical Advisor here at ACC. I'm also a currently practicing physiotherapist in a rural setting. In my two roles, I see both the completion and processing of ACC 45 forms and see why it's important to get it right the first time to benefit your patients. I'll hand over to Marcia.
Kia ora, Jono. Kia ora, everybody. I'm Marcia Lyons. I'm a Clinical Advice Manager here at ACC. My background is in general practice, and I've also spent some time working in occupational medicine. I'll hand you over to Karen to introduce herself.
Kia ora koutou, Karen Mullen, a Client Service Leader at ACC. My teams receive all of the claims and we gather all the necessary information to get those claims successfully into ACC.
Thanks, Karen. Just to let you know, as this is a really big session today, we've got a great team sitting in the background that are going to be able to support with your questions. So if you can use the Q&A function at the top of your screen, we'll endeavour to get through as many as possible today. We should have time at the end of the session. The webinar will be available to you after today, and we'll get that out as quickly as possible. We'll pop it up on our website and we'll email you the slides. The slides have got links and useful resources through them, so that should be able to point you out to some of our new quick guides and information that will support claim writing on the website. Also, just from my point of view, I'd really love you to give me any of your feedback about how today's session went, or the things that you'd like to see. So one of the team's going to pop the link to the feedback into the Q&A box now, and we'll pop it up again at the end. Without ado, I'm going to hand over to Jono, who's going to lead off with our session. Thanks, Jono.
Thanks, Maggie. So before we start, we understand that there are a lot of practice management systems that you may use. Functionality can be an issue, and entering details might be slightly different for each system. Now, this presentation isn't to directly address those issues related to the practice management systems, and all the information required to be placed in these systems are available on our website. So this presentation will follow the flow of an ACC 45 form, sections 1 through to 7. And I'll start off now. So why is it so important? Now, correctly completing an ACC 45 is more than just paperwork. For us, this form allows us to know who your patient or client is, where and what happened during their accident, the injury or injuries they may have sustained, and what supports or assistance your patient or client may need during their recovery. This includes any financial supports they may need for the injury or injuries sustained. Now, if we get the right information from the outset the first time, this reduces delays for everyone. For providers, the ACC 45 is a starting point so you can provide treatment and other services for your patient, and that's so we can correctly pay for the services that you provide. Now I'll hand over to Karen for the personal details section of this presentation. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Jono. So just going to talk a little bit about information about your patient. And so for when we receive a claim, we rely on the patient's personal details to validate whether they do or don't have an existing claim record in our system. So if they do, our automated system is able to match that new claim to that particular patient. So that's a key step to getting a really quick decision and obviously access to treatment and support. Over 90% of claims lodged can actually be automated, processed with the information that you provide. So where a patient hasn't lodged the claim before, the information you give us, we use to create that new client record. So that leads to any further claims that come through being able to be successfully matched to that patient. For both reasons, the completeness of what you provide us and the accuracy of the patient personal details are really, really important. So around 20 to 30% of the claims that we get, we can't actually process automatically because the patient information provided doesn't match an existing customer record. The right information from you and your patient is really key, and we know you do have limited time, but supporting your patient where you can to get the information right, and also having a really good understanding of completing a 45 means we can often let your patient know really quickly that we've accepted their claim. So it just gives a really timely decision. I'm just going to touch on a couple of details that are really, really important. So the patient's full name, so the appropriate use of uppercase, lowercase, and spelling of their name, and the correct use of hyphens and apostrophes. And it can be really helpful to actually validate that with the patient at the time. Their gender, there's now an additional option for gender, but this may or may not be available in your current practice management system. So addresses, the address ensures that any correspondence that we send to the patient is at the correct address, and we do have a legal requirement to notify customers of their decisions. So really important that we get that address correct. The other thing is cell phone numbers, and these are really critical to us because where we do need to gather additional information from your patient, we can easily get in touch with them, but also we do provide text notifications. So we let them know we've received their claim, so they're fully informed throughout the process. And importantly, when we do accept a claim, we can actually provide text notification of an accepted claim. And with the automated system, this can actually be as quickly as when they're still sitting with you in your room. So that's why the information and the accuracy and completeness of the information you provide us is really, really important. So I'm just going to hand back over to Jono now, and he's going to take us through accident and employment.
Thanks, Karen. So I'll focus on the accident part of this section. So one of the most important areas on ACC 45 is the accident section. This section tells us important details of the accident event and mechanism of injury. The section is important for correctness of cover. We provide cover based on what you tell us. So it is important to be as descriptive as possible in the accident section of the ACC 45 form. Vague descriptions such as fall or rugby injury, they don't really give us a lot of detail into the specifics of the accident event itself. Lack of specifics can mean unnecessary delays with the lodgement of your claims, delays for your patients, and their ability to access ACC funded treatments and supports. Now, an example of a completed accident section is on the right side of this slide. Now, hurt on stairs. This isn't very descriptive. However, the second option below it gives us a lot more information on what happened during your accident and what body site is injured. Another example of poor versus a great accident description may be twisted and felt pain. Now, this is a poor example and doesn't provide us with specifics on what may have occurred during the accident event. Now, a better way of describing this example may be helping a friend move house, lifted fridge and twisted when loading into a trailer and felt pain in lower back. Now, this example gives us a clear mechanism and region of body which may have been injured. You can see how very vague accident descriptions might create difficulty for us in determining the exact event when lodging the claim and cause potential delays on claim processing. Now, I'll touch on where did it happen. Now, other important details on the accident event includes the date and approximate time the accident event happened, the scene the accident event occurred, for example, the sports field or at work, on a roadside or in a moving vehicle, and the geographical location of the accident event, which can include overseas. We provide funding for treatment and assistance for your clients through various streams. Now, the importance of letting us know where the accident event occurred helps us understand what pool of funding to take from when helping your patient or client during their recovery. It also helps us plan for future injury prevention strategies. You can see some good examples on the right-hand side of this slide, which helps us determine the location of injury. Now, we understand that there may be times where explaining the scene is difficult, but just try and give us as much detail as you can if you're unsure. Now I'm going to hand over to Marcia to discuss the employment section, as this can only be completed by a medical practitioner. So over to you, Marcia.
Thanks, Jono. So when you get to the employment section on the ACC 45, it's just a short section, but it's really important to ensure that your patient's employment information is accurate. So from a practical perspective, wherever possible, include as much accurate detail about your patient's employer, including the trading name. Now, I know that sometimes your patient doesn't know this exact information. In that situation, just include as much as you can. So, for example, if you know that they work at a supermarket, try to be specific about which supermarket that they work at, such as, even if you can include what suburb the supermarkets are located at. Some people who are working may need additional support, and there's sometimes a misconception that financial support's only available if the accident occurred in the workplace. This isn't true. Be aware also that some claims may be managed by accredited employer programs rather than ACC. An ACC 45 can also be used to lodge sensitive and birth injury claims. Just briefly here, sensitive claims are for mental or physical injuries caused by some criminal acts, for example, injuries caused by sexual violence. Lodgement of these claims can occur many years after the event. For sensitive claims, you don't need to include an accident and injury detail. All you need to do here is just simply note sensitive claim or sexual abuse. For birth injuries, jump across to our website. There's some really great information there about maternal birth injuries, including specific injuries covered. Jono, back to you now for injury diagnosis and assistance.
Thanks, Marcia. So the next couple of slides will concentrate on the diagnosis section. So we provide cover based on the diagnoses that you tell us. However, there are a few caveats to the diagnoses that you may lodge. For example, this diagnosis must be a physical injury. The diagnosis must be within your scope of practice as a practitioner. Now, an example of this is podiatrists can't submit a claim for an upper limb injury, and physiotherapists like myself can't lodge a claim for an internal organ injury or mental injury. Now, your diagnosis must be the best diagnosis which accurately describes the injury as you have assessed it. Don't worry, now this diagnosis can be provisional and can be updated later once further investigations and assessments have been completed. Make sure your diagnosis that you're lodging matches that of your clinical notes. Now, there are a few things within the injury section which also may hold up the processing of the claim that you're lodging. Symptoms such as pain or swelling do not constitute a physical injury and shouldn't be placed in the diagnosis section. Other diagnoses which may reflect symptoms, for example, sciatica or pain in lumbar spine or internal derangement of knee, should not also be added as a diagnosis in this section. Additionally, vague descriptions of an injury will not assist with the processing of the claim that you lodge. Examples of this may be injury of foot or other injury of wrist. This is not specific enough, and it's likely going to cause some delays in processing of the claim for your patient. Don't put suspected of without confirming what your suspicions are. An example of this is placing suspected fracture as an injury diagnosis without actually confirming a fracture has been sustained via imaging. Now, there are numerous syndromes and conditions which do not reflect physical injuries. Now, these should be avoided on claim lodgement unless they're completed or lodged by an appropriate healthcare provider. Now, we will likely contact you for clarification on the specific physical injury diagnosis if incorrect. Now, this unfortunately creates delays for the lodgement of your claim and the ability for your patients to receive assistance from us. Now, there are two complex claim types that can only be lodged by a medical practitioner, and I'll hand back to Marcia to discuss these types of claims.
Thanks, Jono. So yeah, there's two types of claims that have separate tick box on the ACC 45, gradual process injuries and treatment injuries. Now, gradual process injuries claims can only be lodged by a medical practitioner. This type of cover is for people who are at greater risk of injury, infection or disease because of their job compared to others who don't work in those sectors. And this does include noise-induced hearing loss as well. Gradual process injuries develop gradually and are non-acute. And so the impact might not be apparent for some time even after the patient is no longer exposed to those working conditions. These injuries are different to accidents your patient might experience while in a workplace, such as falling from a ladder at work. Work-related gradual process injuries can be lodged by ticking the work-related gradual process injury box on the ACC 45 form. It's really helpful to include relevant clinical information to support the claim, as this will help us make a claim decision faster. We may need to gather more information including from your patients for gradual process injury claims. You'll see on this slide that there's a link there to our website with further information. You'll get the slide pack as mentioned earlier with these links, and it's really useful to go and have a look there if you need more detail. There's also a tick box on the ACC 45 form for treatment injury. A treatment injury is a personal injury arising from treatment, and in the context of this type of injury, treatment includes diagnosis, a decision on the treatment to be provided or not provided, a failure to provide treatment at all or in a timely manner, obtaining or failing to obtain consent, and failure of equipment. Now, there are legislative requirements that need to be met, including physical harm or damage to the patient, which is caused by treatment and is not a necessary part or ordinary consequence of that treatment. You can make a really big difference for your patients by helping to provide the required clinical information, including completing an ACC 2152 treatment injury claim form. Please only tick the treatment injury box if the claim relates to a treatment injury. And again, there's a guide available on our website about treatment injury claims with some really useful information. Jono, I'll come back to you now for READ codes.
Thanks, Marcia. Now, when choosing an injury diagnosis, we use READ codes. The use of ICD or SNOMED codes are okay, as these can be converted to READ codes when the claim is lodged. Sometimes the client or patient will have multiple injuries, and the lodgement form may only have a certain number of entries. Now, in this case, choose the most clinically relevant injuries, which may require assistance or supports. An example of this may be fractures over contusions, head injuries over simple abrasions or lacerations. A full list of READ codes and resources related to this are available on our website, and there's a wee link below. Now, what if the support needed section is completed? As a physiotherapist, personally, I don't use this section regularly. However, please be aware that this section is not a call to action by ACC. Selection of a rehab assistant needed may indicate to us that the client requires support from one of our recovery team members. And it may also be useful to utilise this section to advise that the client is still admitted to hospital. Now, whilst there may be a section or a tick box to request that we call you, it may not be the best way to get a hold of each other, as everyone has busy schedules. We will acknowledge that you do require some assistance from us, and we will try and get in contact with you as soon as we can. However, if you need us to get in touch with you, utilise this section of the ACC 45 form, but try and get in touch with us in another way, for example, sending us an email. Now, as the ability to work section of the ACC 45 form is completed by a medical or nurse practitioner, I'll hand back over to Marcia to discuss this section.
Thanks, Jono. So yeah, as you've mentioned, only medical and nurse practitioners can assess a patient's ability to work. So on the ACC 45, you can indicate your clinical opinion regarding your patient's ability to work for the first 14 days following the date of the accident. If in your clinical opinion, the impacts on ability to work extend beyond this 14-day period, then please use an ACC 18 certificate to let us know that. You'll be aware that we have a Recovery at Work initiative and the strong evidence that recovery at work contributes to positive outcomes for patients. If you're not familiar with the Recovery at Work initiative, please do take the opportunity to have a look at our website after this session. There's heaps of really great resources for you and your patients there. Recovery at work can be an important part of rehabilitation for people who experience non-complex injuries. A person might not be able to do their usual job while they're recovering from an injury, but doing some tasks at work rather than staying at home can help them get better sooner. You can really help right from the time you complete an ACC 45 by getting the certification right, and you can also use this as an opportunity to set recovery expectations with your patients. And remember, your patient doesn't need to be certified fully unfit to receive financial supports. On the ACC 45 certificate, you can select whether, in your opinion, your patient's fit for selected or restricted duties, or if you consider them to be fully fit or fully unfit. You can tell us what your patient is able to do. We'll then liaise with the employer once we have this information. Most patients will be fit for selected or restricted duties, even if they can't manage the duties of their normal work role. This might require some amendments of their duties or hours, or some support and adaptations in their workplace, or perhaps a graduated return to work. If your patient can undertake their normal duties and hours, then they're fully fit for work. In circumstances where your patient is in hospital or confined to bed, or there's a contagion risk, or if being at work could perhaps pose a health and safety risk to them, their colleagues, or the general public, then a period of being fully unfit might be necessary. But as you all know, in reality, there's often a progression of workability during a patient's recovery from injury. For example, a freezing worker who has an ankle sprain while playing sport may attend an urgent care clinic initially. They might undergo some assessments, and perhaps initially they might require some strong pain relief that might have side effects such as drowsiness. And during this time, they might be fully unfit for work. But after a couple of days, they might no longer require that pain relief. And while they may still have some difficulty with prolonged standing or walking, they may be able to do some selected duties. So in these situations, fill in the ACC 45 for that initial period of being fully unfit, and then fill in an ACC 18 for the selected duties fitness, rather than just providing a prolonged period of being fully unfit on the ACC 45 initially. Now I'll hand back to Jono for the last time to talk about declarations.
Thanks, Marcia. Last section, declarations. Now, the declaration section of the ACC 45 form, like Marcia said, is the last part to complete. This certifies that the information you provided in this form is correct. The client has consented for the lodgement of the ACC claim. This is your patient, which you have personally assessed. It allows ACC to collect relevant clinical and health information related to the claim that you've lodged. You agree to the rights and responsibilities of lodging an ACC claim. And this contains your ACC provider number, which identifies you and your scope of practice. This declaration also confirms that your patient's ability to work, as identified in the section discussed by Marcia, is true and correct. Now, these declarations can be completed electronically, and further information related to this can be found on our website. Well, that concludes the webinar. I'd like to take the opportunity to open the floor for any questions that anyone may have. You can pop these into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to discuss these questions. Back to you, Maggie.
Thanks, Jono. Yeah, great to see the Q&A section come alive. There's just a couple of questions that I wanted to put to you that people had asked at time of registration that I thought was some great questions. So Karen, perhaps you can answer this one. What happens if the wrong box is accidentally ticked?
So if you accidentally tick, say, a treatment injury box on your form, the claim still comes through. We would process it initially as if it was a treatment injury. So it would go to the team that would look after those particular types of injuries. However, that team is still able to make a decision. Say if the claim was actually for a fall, they are still able to make a decision about a claim for a fall. So the claim still comes through. We can still make a decision.
Thank you. Jono, this was a popular question as well. What should you do if you're not really confident about what the patient's telling you about how their injury occurred, or you've got some doubts about what you're hearing from them? What could you do in those circumstances?
That's a good question. I'd probably use your best clinical judgment, and recommend giving the best available clinical information that you can on lodgement of the claim. You can also use the reporting fraud form on our website, and if you have any concerns relating to potential fraudulent claims, if you use that form, it can be anonymous, or you can leave your details and we can get in contact with you. I'd probably just recommend as well, just be clear and consistent within your clinical assessment notes relating to your concerns, and if required, we can get these notes or request these notes off you. Does that answer the question all right, Maggie?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jono. That's really helpful. So head across to the website. So Marcia and Jono, I'm not sure how best you want to answer this, or perhaps together. And this is a really common question about re-aggravation versus a new injury. So somebody's got an existing claim and they come back to you. When is it a new injury form should be done, and when is it a re-aggravation of existing claim?
Do you want to start off, Marcia?
Yeah, shall I go, and you can add your knowledge. I'd say you need to be guided really by your clinical judgment to some extent, and the diagnosis or diagnoses that you're looking at. So, for example, if somebody had a sprain injury covered by ACC 3 years ago and that resolved and they got on with normal life, and now they've had an injury and they've injured the same area, it's probably a new sprain rather than an aggravation of something 3 years earlier. But that's where your clinical judgment really comes in. Sometimes it can be tricky to work out, and I think in that case, give your best opinion, but maybe put a comment in the comment section of the form just to explain that you're not sure, or perhaps you're still investigating, or something else that might be useful for us to help to understand that situation. John, I don't know if you want to add a further example or further comment to that question.
I think you pretty much nailed it. We've got to really decide whether a new physical injury has occurred from a new separate event, right? A good example, I used that example prior, helping a friend move house, lifted fridge, twisted when loading into trailer, and then felt pain in the lower back. Now, 2 weeks later or something, that same person might, lift their child or lift a box or something and feel, an increase in symptoms. You've got to use your clinical judgment to say, hey, has a new injury been sustained over and above that original injury, or is it just an aggravation or a retweak or something of those symptoms from that original injury? Say that lifting and loading into trailer example, is it just a re-aggravation of those pre-existing symptoms that are there? So hopefully that creates a little bit more clarity. But yeah, long story short, I'd say use your clinical judgment and see if there's a new injury that's been sustained.
Thanks, Jono. There's another question around what to do when you've got a provisional diagnosis. I'm not sure, Karen, you might be the one to answer this, but what happens when it does come in with a provisional diagnosis? What's the process from there when we, I guess, haven't got radiology to start with?
Okay. So it doesn't affect the way the 45 is processed, so it still comes through. We still look at it. What would happen then is that just the assessment process of looking at that diagnosis, gathering the information that we need to understand whether we can accept cover. So basically what would happen there is it's just a little bit more investigation, and then the result is it would just create a bit of a delay for the patient in receiving a decision. So it really depends on the extent of the investigation that we would need to do to have a confirmed diagnosis there.
Great, thanks, Karen. I think that's a wrap up of the questions that we've got that we were going to ask you. I was just having a look through the questions that have been loaded. So thank you to those that have submitted questions today. Hopefully the answers were useful. As I said, we will send this slide deck out to you, so it will come out as a resource with all the links to the website and to the guides that Marcia talked about. Hopefully you also be aware we've started to extend out some of our quick guides, so just bite-sized pieces of information. And if this is the first webinar that you've been to, then do check out the playlist that we have on YouTube of webinars for providers. So I think that probably brings us to the end of today's session. I just wanted to share with you some ways that you can get in touch with us. So if you do need to get in touch with us, please do use the provider help contact numbers, or you can use the form on our website to get in touch with an engagement and performance manager. Or as I said earlier, I'd really appreciate your feedback on these sessions so that we know how to shape them for the future. So you can either use the link that we've had posted in the Q&A, or please do drop me an email at provider.education@acc.co.nz, and that goes for the people that are watching this video after the session. So on behalf of the team, I'd just like to say thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to spend half an hour with us. We hope that it's been useful. And I'd just like to thank Marcia, Karen, Jono and the team in the background for supporting today's session. Thanks, team. Kia ora.